Welcome to the Nikki and Rule podcast experience. I'm Rule Sample. I'm joined by the winner of the best local longleaf political ad, Nikki Bascom. Nikki, good evening. It's good to see you again, my friend.
Good evening. Good evening. I did not win. I happened to be in the advertisement. It was about me, but all the props to Meredith and Mary Margaret. They are the genius behind that advertising, and congratulations to them for creating something so amazing. It was a great ad. It really was.
You got to go.
I might use it again for something. Who
You
knows?
got to go to longleafpoll.com. That's longleafpoll.com and bring up the article about the best political ads. And you will see our friend Nikki Bascom there as she ran for school board. Nikki, who's
Yay.
joining us tonight?
I am so excited. I get so excited about all of our guests on the show, but this is someone, as I've been looking at through some of my genealogy, that there is a very slight chance that our family lines cross, and I'm so excited to welcome Representative Ted Davis. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're excited to
Cousin,
have you.
it's good to be here, cousin.
Oh man, it's going to be one of those nights.
It is.
Ted
Can I,
is.
can I tell one story on Nikki during the election? Is it true that you dressed up like Supergirl and ran down the line at the voting site saying, "I'm here to save the day"?
I did. I did.
Oh, that was awesome.
It was Halloween, and I was dressed as Supergirl, and I did. The lines were so long; everyone was waiting. The line was about an hour and a half long, and I just ran down, just jumping around like a lunatic, yelling, "I'm here to save the day!" And they're like, "I'm good. What are you gonna do? Bring us pizza, water?" And I'm like, "No, just me, just me."
If
And then I
That's
got
something my kinfolk would do. That's why we probably are related.
if
I
you
was channeling my inner Ted Davis, is what I was.
no, I draw the line at thinking of Representative Ted Davis in tights. That's
Oh, well, now I'm gonna have nightmares.
Ted, you're joining us from your man cave. You've got cymbals back in the background. I don't. You play the drums, don't you, sir?
I do.
And you used to play drums in a contemporary style worship band for a while, didn't you?
No, I did it one night at our church when we started contemporary music. Now that was my musical career at St. Andrew's Covenant Church.
That's Presbyterian. Presbyterians should never play drums in church, sir. It's just one of those things. Is that it's just that Calvin would roll over in his grave in 4/4
Probably
time.
would.
Okay.
That was all right. It got us in the mood.
Ted, you are finishing up an incredible 2 years. It hasn't been the easiest of 2 years there in the North Carolina House of really taking on the governor at every single turn. You've had, is it 29 vetoes, overrides? Is it 29 or 39?
No. I thought it was 27.
Is it 27?
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
I have a folder here.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to pause here for just a minute as he goes into the archives of the Ted Davis personal veto override history book.
29.
29.
29 good vetoes.
Nikki, I believe I said 29. Did I not say 29?
You were correct.
I plead
You
the
always
fifth.
right, Rule.
I plead the fifth. It's family.
It's family.
Mean, why are you even putting me in the middle of this?
Well, your latest one, Ted, was SB. Was it SB 382?
382.
And
Right.
this one got a lot of press because it they said it was all about this disaster relief for Western North Carolina, and that was in it. But there's a whole lot more to this bill. First, what was that? What was the disaster relief aspect of this thing?
Sure. Well, one thing I will say that I did not like about the bill is that it was done as a conference report. Uh, that is where the House and the Senate leadership, being the Speaker and the Pro Tem, get together and approve what the content is. And they move it once again as a conference report, which cannot be amended. You
Okay.
either take it or you leave it. I will say what I did not like about this bill. I was driving to Raleigh the morning that we were going to have session, and uh, I did something I shouldn't do while you're driving, but I got my phone and I looked just to see if I'd gotten any emails on my legislative um, phone or website. And yes, it said, here is the final version of the bill. Now you got to imagine this is like 10 in the morning. I'm on I-40 and they send me a 131-page bill expecting me to read it before we went in and voted on it.
Wow.
I didn't like that.
Yeah.
That's not the way you should do business.
Mm-mm.
And one thing I'm committed to, and I've talked to some other members of the House, that we want to go in and change our caucus rules. Yeah, we're not going to do that anymore. We're not. If the Senate wants to send over something like that, or if the House wants to do something like that for us to vote on, we've got to get it early enough to be able to look at it, vet it. I think it should go through the committee process, really, before we vote on it. But
Hmm.
anyway, having said that, one thing that I've been disappointed in as a result of that bill passing is people making it seem like the appropriation in that bill was the only thing we've done. And that's totally incorrect. As you know, we have had two appropriations prior to this bill. First off, I'll say that it's been estimated that the total amount it's going to take for Western North Carolina to recover is $53 billion.
That's
That's
53
billion with
with
a
a
B.
B, with a B, a Bravo. Wow.
And the first appropriation we did was for 877 million. And then the second appropriation we did was 200, I'm sorry, um, it was 877 million for the first two appropriations combined. Excuse me. And then this bill that we passed has another 277 million. So that's a little over 1.15 billion with the B
Mm,
dollars
mm.
that the legislature has already appropriated for Western North Carolina. And it hasn't been that long since this thing happened. So to think that the legislative process has moved that quickly because we knew the importance of getting this funding done. And I will say most of it has not been spent yet. And the reason for that is we're not like the Democrats that just throw the money out there. What we did before the first appropriation is we tried to get a list of exactly what needed to be done, then prioritize that list and provide the funding that would accomplish what needs to be done there. We did the same thing before we did the second appropriation, and we're going to do the same thing again concerning this appropriation. So when you look at that over $1.15 billion, yes, it's going to go to Western North Carolina, but it's going to go in a way that we know where it's going, and it's be going for specific items. And if you remember, previously after the hurricanes, there was millions and millions of dollars that the legislature approved to help those people. There are still people that are living in motels because that money has not been spent. And we had a legislative investigative committee to call in the people, and these were Cooper's appointments. I'm not playing politics. I'm just telling you the facts.
Hmm.
These were Cooper's people that were doing this. It was run by the Democrats. And we had them come in to answer questions. And they had the audacity to ask for millions upon millions more dollars because they were underfunded now, with no transparency, no explanation of where the money went. And of course, the legislature did give some, but not all that they wanted. And the person that was the head of that agency got fired. that's one of the reasons why we are doing what we are doing now as Republicans. We are not going to go through that same route that happened previously under Cooper's leadership. We're going to make sure, number one, that we, once again, we prioritize what the needs are. We do the funding that is needed to meet those priorities. And there's going to be accountability and there's going to be transparency. In other words, they're going to have to report back to the legislator saying, yes, this is the amount of money we received. Yes, this is the amount of money that was expended. And yes, this is what it was expended for. So we're going to go about this totally different than we did before. And one other thing, too, that's interesting is that we are trying to get money from the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
President Biden has proposed $100 billion relief package for multiple states. And we had a delegation to go up recently and trying to seek $26 billion of that money for North Carolina.
Wow.
And the thing is, as I'm sure you're aware, normally when the federal government gives you money like that, there's strings attached. And one of those strings is the state has to put in at least 10% match.
Mm.
Well, that's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So another reason why we're being careful about how we spend the money so far is that if we just go and, throw it out there right now, we may not have the money to make that match.
Hmm.
So that's another reason why we're being very careful in trying to get this money from the federal government. If we have to do a match, we'll have the money to be able to do that. Plus, we can do other appropriations for Western North Carolina, which we do intend to do in the next legislative session. And I might add, this is going to be something we're going to have to address for years to come because we ain't got $53 billion
Yeah.
to do this.
No.
And I know the governor wanted us to appropriate, I forget how much it was. That totally depleted our rainy day fund. And we're not going to do it. And once again, we've talked about this before. If you remember, Cooper was criticizing the legislature years ago because we were creating this rainy day fund and not spending it. And what did we do when we had all these different catastrophes? We had that rainy day fund and we were able to help people, number one, and we were able to do it without either having to raise taxes or cut services. I mean, it just reeks of the difference between the way Republicans do things and Democrats do things.
Yeah.
And the proof is the pudding. Just look what happened.
I think those of us here on the East Coast of North Carolina, Nikki, correct me if I'm wrong, is we get hurricanes and storms here all the time, but
Yep.
the major difference is that this hit Western North Carolina out of nowhere, and they're not really
Correct.
set up for this kind of stuff.
No, they're not. And most of the people don't have flood insurance.
No, not at all. Well, and I think it's a little bit different here. We're not sliding down a mountain. Half of our
True.
belongings aren't 50 miles away, buried in mud either. The cleanup is a little bit different. I think fixing the infrastructure is totally different. I mean, I couldn't imagine trying to fix the roads and the bridges, and there's still parts of Western North Carolina that you cannot get to. You just can't get to them. The one thing I can say, and Mr. Davis can attest to this because his family's from Western North Carolina, or actually you're from Eastern Tennessee, is they're super resilient. They can do miraculous things that we couldn't imagine. It's almost like comparing apples to oranges. A major hurricane in Western North Carolina is completely different from a major hurricane in Eastern North Carolina. The only difference is they've never seen anything like this. We're kind of used to it. We know what to prepare for. They've never seen anything, and we don't know how to help them either. It's something we've never seen before either. It's just
one of the things, Nikki, that I really was very glad to hear from the people up there, that one of the major avenues of help came from churches. The different congregations came and were helping people right off the get-go and donating supplies, food. And that's a good feeling to know that was going on. And of course, you got the federal government coming in trying to help and do temporary housing. Of course, you hear complaints that FEMA's not acting quickly enough, yada, yada, yada. But once again, it's kind of reminds me a little bit of when this Gen X thing came out. Nobody knew what it was.
Hmm.
Well, that's kind of like up there in the mountains, like you said. They've never experienced anything like this.
No.
And there are stories I've heard of people sitting on rooftops watching other houses come by in the water. It's just horrible. And businesses, it's going to take who knows how long for businesses to recover and people to get back to getting a livelihood. Um,
It
and,
is
and just to hear those
absolutely
stories, I mean, it's awful.
it
As a
is
matter of fact,
absolutely
Representative
devastating.
Dudley Green, who lives up there, spoke uh, when that bill was the Senate Bill 382, the override was being addressed, and to hear him talk, I mean, you want to cry,
Mhm.
literally,
Mm,
to see what these people are going through,
mm.
and
There's
this
a
is from
really
firsthand
good
knowledge.
there's a really good group in Western North Carolina called Operation Gila. I think it's called Hilo. One of my girlfriends is working with them, and they have already had over 80 mobile homes, not mobile homes, but RVs
Mhm.
donated
Mm.
and for use in Western North Carolina for families to get them out of the tents. I mean, it was what 3 weeks after the hurricane hit that they started having temperatures dropping drastically and still living in tent cities. It's
Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
not
I've
this.
been receiving reports about that, and I know that people there are asking if they can have some relief from local zoning. Um, have them
Oh
get all
yeah,
these permits and stuff so
Yeah.
they can try to get some temporary structure, which those rules may apply to, waived so they can get in there. And they're doing it anyway. As
yeah,
a matter of fact, there was a fellow from one organization said, "Look, I may be breaking the rules, but I'm going to help these people."
Yeah.
yep,
Yeah, we saw that a lot with folks saying, just basically driving by blockades and say, "Listen, I've got to get things up to folks who need it." And you folks in the legislature actually moved pretty quickly on getting both financial relief, vote relief to them,
Mhm.
and all these other in record time, and probably because you were able to get that out of that rainy day fund. You weren't didn't have to move money
Well,
around. You already had it.
if we didn't have that rainy day fund, it wouldn't have been done.
Yeah. Well, the other
Uh,
thing
I,
about
I,
the other thing about SB 382 that they didn't really talk about. They kept talking about you folks withholding this disaster relief. Is the reallocation of how the Board of Elections is overseen. That is a big deal, Ted, because we still have elections that are not that haven't been decided yet because of the Board of Elections. What did you guys do in SB 382 with the BOE?
something that made the Democrats very upset. What basically, um, what it does, it transfers election board appointment power from the governor, which would include the incoming Democrat John Stein, and it transfers it over to the state auditor, which would be the incoming Republican Dave Bollick. And the Democrats are very upset about it. But to me, Rule, I looked at several things in supporting that. Number one, which I think is very kind of ironic, after every election, people say, we want an audit. We want a forensic audit. We want you to go in there and we want you to do this audit so we can determine whether or not this election was valid or not. Well, who better to do the audit than the state auditor? I mean, we're giving the people what they want.
Yeah.
If it was the old adage, you better be careful what you ask for. You just might get it. Well,
mhm,
they're going to get it. You know, and the other thing that think of all the election irregularities that have gone on in the last 4 years since Governor Cooper has been in charge.
Hmm.
And a perfect example is what happened here in New Hanover County this last election. I mean,
mhm.
you have an
Goodness.
election, you've got the Board of County Commissioners, Nikki, the Board of Education,
Mhm.
wanting to know, all right, are the votes in? Did I win? Did I lose? What's going on? And then days afterwards, the local director said, oh, by the way, we found all these provisional ballots that we didn't count, and they weren't counted in violation of state law. And what really got me was that the election director said, well, I was directed by the state board that I could do this. Yet the state board denied that they ever said that. And so the county commissioners have hired an outside law firm to go in and do a audit, if that's the correct word, to find out just what happened. And the local elections director is refusing to cooperate. Will take no part in that investigation. Now that's got to tell you something.
But they
And
but they still have to do the audit, right? So
well, they're going to do it with or without the assistance of this local director. But that to me just reeks. And I have heard horror stories from other representatives of things that happened during the election that were totally counting votes from people who were deceased. I mean, just it was just incredible. And we had the big discussion before we actually went in and voted on the bill. We did discuss it in our Republican caucus. Of course, I didn't have time to read that 131-page bill like I probably did before we had the caucus. And it was a long caucus. And we really, as a matter of fact, when that topic came up, nobody was saying anything. So I raised my hand. I said, look, I'm on the fence about this thing. I want to hear some discussion about the pros and the cons, about why we should or should not do this, so I can make up my mind. Well, then everybody and their brother started talking. And it was really interesting to hear all the different things that people were saying. And by everybody, Rule and Nikki, agreed that the process for which this bill was done was wrong.
Hmm.
You don't wait till the last minute and shell out a 131-page bill that you can't amend and expect people to be able to go in and intelligently vote on it. But once again, it was a take it or leave it. Either you do it or you don't. But by far, everyone commented about the procedure. There was no question that nobody liked the way it was done. But the biggest part of that bill that people talked about was the election part. And really, and different representatives from different, districts throughout the state were telling things that went on that weren't right with their board of elections. And I mean, you can't make this stuff up. And it's not like they all got together and said, this is what we're going to say. So, I mean, this was independent people, separate apart from each other, telling these things. And it really made me even better prepared to vote for that aspect of the bill. And I think what you're going to find, well, number one, I believe what you will find now is you're going to have Republican controlled board of elections. And I don't think you're going to find this stuff that's been going on like it was before. And I mean that very seriously.
Well,
Um,
we have
like David Bolick said, he didn't ask for this. This is not his idea, and he wasn't part of it. It was just if we were going to do it and give that authority to somebody, who would be best to do it? And once again, it fell back to the auditor, which is what everybody wants after an election anyway.
And the auditor is a statewide elected office, so it's not like we're giving it to some bureaucrat someplace.
That's absolutely correct.
And by the way, Boliak won the Longleaf, North Carolina political ad competition. So not only did he get into office, he won. Now, Ted, if you had run a series of ads, I'm sure that you would have been in that running someplace. But you weren't in that. You weren't in the showing this year.
Well, he and I met on several occasions, and he was quite frank with what he wanted to do as auditor, why he was interested in doing that. And I supported him.
Mm-hmm. One of the big things that we saw was, especially at UNCW, was all this last minute, same day registration.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Are you folks talking about that at the state level of somehow getting that under control? You brought early voting down, which was amazing. Is there anything that the legislation can do to curb that a little bit?
One of the things that I learned from this experience was I introduced a bill about requiring mail-in ballots to be in on, I think, by the end of close of business on election day.
Mm-hmm.
I had introduced, we talked about this before, I think it was like 7 different election integrity bills. And what we ended up doing was the House and the Senate came up with a combined bill that addressed election issues. And one thing that I did not think about, I really did not when I did that, and that language did go into that bill I'm talking about, the consensus bill, was what would be the penalty if you didn't count those votes like you were supposed to. So that's something that I know in talking with some of the other representatives that we need to address. Because right now, even though our local election director did not follow the law and did not do what they were supposed to do in those provisional ballots, um, what do you do about it?
There's no penalty. There's
That's right.
so
That's
he
right. And it really, I could have thumped myself on the head, but I just never dreamed that anybody would violate, that provision, but they did. So yes, I think that there's a desire to look at that to see what we can do because if you're going to have a rule that you got to do something, then there should be something there to punish if you don't do it right, or else you don't have the incentive to go ahead and do what you're supposed to do anyway.
Mhm.
Well,
So
because you're
and
an
I think there's
honest
some other
person.
things. I mean, I know one of the things that I introduced was a bill to reduce the time for early voting,
Mm-hmm.
and
Ooh, yes.
uh, both the speaker and the pro tem said, no, we're not going to do that. There's enough going on as it is now. Uh, so we're not going to proceed on that one. So I want to look at addressing that again because I think what's
Yes.
going on now is absurd. I think it's
Yes.
absurd for candidates, and Nikki knows this, to sit
Mm-hmm.
there and have to campaign all those days of early voting, then try to find supporters that are willing to go out and work the polls for you during all those days, and then the Board of Elections having to be
Working.
responsible for that all of those days. And I guess what really gets me when I was coming along, and I think through my first two terms as a county commissioner, you had one day to vote. That was it. That's the way it always was. Now there was an exception if you were in the military and overseas.
Mhm.
But I mean, if you wanted to vote, you got in your car or you got somebody to drive you and you went to your polling place and you voted. And that was it. And now we just got this ad nauseum of early voting days and all of this and all of that. And the least thing that we do, the Democrats say we're trying to suppress voting. And to me, the whole thing is just totally absurd. And I think all these lawsuits are absurd. I think everything is absurd because why can't you have an election? People go vote. Let's determine who the winner is, and let's move on with the program.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You don't have that anymore.
Nikki, in Iraq after the war, they went in, they voted, and they had the elections, the results that same day. In
Mm-hmm.
Florida, which is what, 5 times the population of North Carolina, they have the results the same day.
Mm-hmm.
And you as a candidate, you were waiting around for days to get answers.
We were waiting around for days and then recounts and all of this. But to piggyback on the long days of early voting, something that I brought up last week is we're all human with all the human fallacies, and we're going to make mistakes. And when you're tired and you have so many days and long hours and you're not allowed to leave, because I worked for the elections for a few years. You're not allowed to leave. You're hanging out in this room for days and days and days. The tendency for something to go wrong or a temper to flare, or we're just creating a perfect storm all on our own by having all of these early voting days. And I understand that we don't want to suppress a vote, but if the vote is super important to you, you will find a way to be there. You will be there. Maybe looking into having non-traditional hours instead of a 13, 14, 15 hour day.
Mhm.
It's grueling, not only for the people electioneering outside and the candidates, but it's grueling for the Board of Elections.
I agree.
It's a
And,
lot.
and one thing that really got me, the local director says, well, we didn't have enough people. Well, the answer to that is number one, everybody
Cut
in the
your
world knew
hours.
this was, I know, everybody in the world knew this was going to be a big election.
Hmm.
Yes.
Everybody in the world knew that people were going to come out of the yin yang to go and vote. And I've talked to several of the commissioners who both said all they had to do was ask us.
Yeah.
All that election board had to have done was gone to the commission and say, look, we anticipate a huge turnout. we don't have enough people here. Can we hire some temporary help? They didn't do that.
Yeah, because the county commission actually gave them more money this year. The board of the BOE asked for more money, and the county commission gave them more money. It wasn't like they were underfunded.
Well, plus, if they even needed more,
Yeah,
they would have given it to them.
Yeah.
I really think it was set up to fail, just so they could sit there and try to blame it on, which
Republicans.
Everybody
is funny because everything that has happened since I've been in Raleigh with the governor or even this, it always come back, well, you don't give us enough money. You don't give us enough money. Well, you don't ask for it. And I know for a fact on the state,
Mhm.
we, being the General Assembly, asked the State Board of Elections, do you need more money for this coming election? And they said no. Well, we gave them money anyway. I'm serious.
Yeah,
So even if the state board comes in and says something like that, that is totally false because we gave them money after they said they didn't want any in the first place. And then you got New Hanover County saying, we don't need any money. Or excuse me, did not even go to the commissioners
yeah.
and request more money for temporary help, which they would have been given.
Now,
Yeah,
Donald Trump has said that he is not a fan of early voting, and if he had his way, he would get rid of it all the way across the country, and 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 go to paper ballots. Now, the federal government has no say in state elections, but is there ever any chance of us going back to just one day of voting here in North Carolina?
I wouldn't mind it
Mm,
myself.
mm,
I mean, if you wanted to have maybe 2 days of early voting, I mean, seriously, a smaller amount,
yeah,
because I understand that people can get sick and not be able to vote,
yeah,
or people may have some sort of personal emergency that could prevent them from to vote on that one day.
right,
So I'd be willing to sit down and try to figure out a much better way to do this. But I think the way the system is right now is absurd.
yeah. Well,
I really do.
on a lighter note, as I look at the two of you in split screen, I'm actually starting to see more and more of the family resemblance.
Yeah. Turn to the
Probably.
side, Nick. See that side view, don't you
Well,
think?
I was kind of looking in the flowing lock of hair area, but that's okay.
Now don't look. Hey, wait a minute. Now don't pick on the bald guy.
What do you got going on for the holidays? You're home from the legislature, is that right?
Let me do one other thing if I could. There's another thing we did that day, and that is we passed a constitutional amendment
Yeah,
that will go on the next election about voter ID. And of course, the beauty of a constitutional amendment is the governor can't veto
yeah,
it. So we don't have to put up with that mess. But really, it's very simple of what that amendment would do. And that is, as you know, right now it's the law in North Carolina that if you vote in person or if you do an absentee vote by a mail in ballot, you have to provide a voter ID. Well, previously, there was a constitutional amendment that went into effect that says you have to have a voter ID when you do in person voting. But there's no mention in the Constitution that that also applies to absentee voting by mail in. So, what this constitutional amendment would do would be to add that
hmm,
so that the Constitution would say the same thing that our current law is. And so, one thing that would do obviously is make it consistent with North Carolina law. But quite frankly, the other thing it would make it harder for courts or future legislature to undo these rules. So that was the reason why we went forward on that because we being Republicans have fought long and hard to get voter ID in, which the Democrats do not want. And you're going to love this. I got an invitation to Josh Stein's governor inauguration. Guess what you got to have to get in?
an
ID.
An
ID.
ID. Of course. I remember. I still have it on my phone. There was years ago, Reverend Barber. They had the moral majority Mondays and all that stuff, and it was so against voter ID. Well, he had a rally in Raleigh, and I got a hold of one of the pamphlets talking about the rally, and one of the things it said, you got to bring an ID.
Amazing. And
I guess to go to the rally that was going to argue against voter ID.
And the other
but
the
you
other
got to
con-
have an ID to get in.
the other addition of the state constitution is this whole idea of that you have to be a resident of the a citizen of the United States in order to vote in any election in North Carolina. So
Mhm.
um, it's a lot of great things going on. So let me go back to my earlier question. As Nikki sits over there in her horrible Christmas sweater, and
Santa's favorite.
what do you got going on for Christmas, Ted?
I'm going to my cousin's house.
Are you up there in moonshine territory?
My
No, in
house?
Nikki's house.
Oh,
My
Nikki's
house.
house.
Come
Yeah.
on. Come on.
No,
Mr. Davis, thank you for joining us tonight. It's sure
oh,
good talking to you.
anytime. Anytime. I'm really glad y'all are doing this.
Well,
I think it's going to be
thanks.
great.
Thanks. I'm a co-host to a wonderful, wonderful person. So,
Oh,
we're gonna.
I think I'm the co-host to a wonderful person. Rule and I
No,
have a
no.
lot of fun.
I think Rule's got the best part of that deal.
I do. I
Aw.
do. It's the same thing in my marriage. Is that for during my anniversaries, I get congratulations and Pam gets condolences. And I'm not really too sure why that happens. So,
I
uh,
can understand that. I can see
Ted, we're going to let you go. Thanks for joining us
it.
tonight.
Okay. My pleasure, Rule. Nikki, a
Thanks,
pleasure.
man. We'll
Merry
Y'all
talk
take
Christmas.
care.
soon.
Merry
Merry
Christmas.
Christmas.
So, boy, that was great. That was great. I'll
That
tell you
was
what.
that was fun. I love Representative Davis. He is such a genuine person. I really do enjoy him.
You know, we talk a lot about term limits and everything else, but you know what? He's been there for a while, and he gets a lot of things done. He knows how to move, and we have New Hanover County in the front row of the legislature simply because he's been doing this for so long. Uh,
Yeah, but you know what? I think the reason why we have to talk about term limits is because of people that get into office that are not as honorable
yeah,
as Ted Davis, that aren't as honest, and they use their position of power in nefarious ways. I I honestly think because we're just so lucky and so blessed to have Mr. Davis on our side.
yeah,
Speaking for all of his constituents, he doesn't speak just for the Republicans. He's speaking for all of his constituents, which
yeah,
gives you a good feeling that he is honorable. He
yeah.
really is. He lives up to that name.
He's a statesman. You know, there are politicians, and he's a wise politician in his own right, but he's a statesman, and that's always a good thing. So let's moving on to some other things that are going on around the area real quickly. Um, Crystal Mangum, or however you pronounce your last name, out
What a
of the blue.
crazy! Wow, where
What
did
a
that come from?
Where did that if for those of you who can't remember, if you haven't seen the news lately, Crystal Mangum accused three Duke lacrosse players back in 2006. Nikki was graduating middle school back then, but back in
I
2006,
wish.
but
Holy cow!
out of the
That's
you're
the
welcome.
year. Actually, that's the year I met my husband. I was a single mom, and Warren and I met in
Oh
2006. So I
wow,
remember this story. Because as a single mom, that you hear about rapes and things like that, it really stands out in your mind. Not saying that it wouldn't stand out in another person's mind, but a single mom of two young kids, it really stuck out. I will never forget following that story every day.
yeah. I mean, by the way, if you do have young kids who are and you're listening to this podcast, we'll keep it PG, but just so you know, but she accused three Duke lacrosse players of gang raping them, and as the story went on, it got worse and worse and worse. Yet at the same time,
Hmm.
there was less and less oh, I lost it.
corroboration.
There it is, of the story to the facts. But the prosecutor at the time, who is a Wilmington native, Michael Nafong,
Hmm.
kept pressing forward, and it took an attorney general by the name of Roy Cooper to step in and say, enough is enough. There's nothing here. And he not only did he stop the process, he got on and said, these three boys are innocent. And that, I think, was the starting point of this whole idea of the press taking over everything. These boys were condemned by media, Nikki, and we're continuing to see that today.
They were. It's there was a newscaster here in town who told a friend of mine that there is a difference between a news anchor and a media person. A news anchor is going to tell you the facts, or at least you would hope that they would just stick to the facts. Media can sometimes drive a narrative,
Yeah.
or put innuendos out there, and it's kind of sad. And from what I understand, the lacrosse players actually did win a settlement with Duke University back in 2007. Um, because of how Duke University handled the case. So you've got so many different things that were playing into this court case. But why she comes out now, so many years later, and here she is, she could be free in the next 2 years because she was arrested for killing her boyfriend. Was it her
Yes,
boyfriend?
she was arrested for killing her boyfriend. I don't know if it was manslaughter charge or murder in the third degree or something like that, and sentenced to time in prison. And her earliest parole is, I think you said 2026.
2026. So this is
Yeah.
something that happened in 2011. Now I could understand 2011. She's going through this murder trial, and this comes out. But why now? Why just out of the blue she decides that she's going to say, "Hey, by the way, I falsely accused them, and I apologize. I hope they can forgive me." What do you think? Okay, coming from seminary school, and what do you think? Can you? I mean,
Well,
she ruined these poor guys' lives. Is there a forgiveness out there? What could you do? What do you do?
Well, that's an interesting question. Personally, I believe that there is forgiveness, if not in this life, in the life to come, but you still have to be held responsible and accountable.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I believe in capital execution. I believe that if you murder somebody, you pay the penalty. It's not a punishment because you can't learn anything from it because you're dead. However, there are plenty of people who are put to death who probably uh, meet their Lord from a conversion at some point. And maybe that's what's going on with her. Maybe she has, in that the podcast that she did all this on, she did talk about God a lot, and she talked about forgiveness a lot. But at the same time, she has been diagnosed with several mental disorders, and so you never know what's going on with her. It's a tough call. Is that, the statute of limitations on all of this have ran out years ago. She can't be sued. She can't be prosecuted. In 2026, if she gets out on parole, she's a free woman. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
So do you think it was just that she had a guilty conscience and she just had to get it out there just so she can go on living her life better? Or I think if I were one of these young men's mothers, I have a 28-year-old and a 26-year-old. So if that would have happened to one of my children, and it ruined their lives. I mean, I raised this child. I helped put them through Duke University. I mean,
Yeah.
we worked hard. And for her to come back so many years later and say, I'm sorry, I don't know if I would have forgiveness in my heart. I'm just what do you do with that? I mean, I'm baffled. I'm baffled. I I told her the statute of limitations may be over for, suing her, or she probably has nothing. But the statute of limitations for forgiveness, I'm just,
Well, we have to.
I think as a mother, I would have rather have not known and just, I mean, they've gone on with their lives.
Yeah.
They're somewhere else
Well, one
now.
of them is a lawyer himself, and he went to law school and has become an attorney and a defense attorney, and so he's kind of used his anger in a constructive way. They were all
Good.
they all received a $20 million. Each of them received $20 million from Duke University because Duke mishandled
Oh,
this
mm,
incredibly badly. And the whole wrap of that is that if you've got boys going to college universities, you need to tell them, don't go out and party, don't go out and get drunk,
mm.
don't go out and do all that stuff, because you don't have a chance. It's going to be rough. What else you got going on there, Nikki?
Boy, it was kind of sad bringing this up because on December the 5th, there were two students at UNCW that were arrested on allegedly rape. We'll see how that unfolds because it's still fairly a new case. But and I think the sad part about this, as I have two sons and I have two daughters, and the sad part is, you feel like you have to tell your sons, be very careful when you go out there to, do not put yourself in a situation where you can be accused. But then on the other side of the coin, you're telling your daughters, don't put yourself in a situation where something like that could happen.
Yeah,
And I think when people like Crystal come out, it just it really damages. We work so hard, and I say we, people that have dealt with sexual abuse and sexual assault, we worked so hard to not be that victim, because for a long time people didn't listen, and that's where the hashtag Me Too movement came from. Is there were a lot of allegations out there, and many of them were true, and this just brings up, when someone like Crystal comes out, it just destroys all of that, and
yeah.
it just breaks my heart for all of those that are going through rape. And then I see this UNCW rape case, and I wonder which side is it. And I think it just further divides everyone.
There was a small protest at the Wilmington Police Department over the Sunday. It was on WCT. It was a group of about 30 women who were very upset about the way the Wilmington Police Department investigates sexual crime issues, and there are two sides to every story, but there's no
Mhm.
question that how we go about this has got to change, because on one hand you've got to be responsive to the victim, but on the other side you've got to protect the accused. And oftentimes, especially on a UNC, on a college campus, not just UNCW, there's so much involved. You have alcohol involved, you have drugs involved, you have so many things going on.
Hormones. Ooh.
Hormones.
But then it's also, you're trying to deal with all of this with the alcohol, the drugs, the being out on your own for the first time, trying to navigate all of this. But then so much becomes, it's the court of public opinion,
Yeah.
which makes it even worse.
Yeah.
because people, they'll read that sensational headline, and all of a sudden you're guilty. It doesn't matter what the article says. It doesn't matter what the facts say. It doesn't matter what the court says. And because of that one sensational headline that popped up on Facebook or Instagram or X for one brief moment, public opinion is already made, and you're guilty.
Yeah,
Either
because
way.
we live in a new era of 24-hour news, and you've got to go with the story. And if you have to retract it later, okay, but at least you were the first person to break the story. That, I think,
Oh
is
yeah. Oh, you got to be the first one. You
you
got to
got to
be
be
the
the
first
first one.
one.
And then we had another breaking story. You sent me this earlier today about a shooting in Madison, Wisconsin. This is
Yes,
heartbreaking.
I was just watching it on the news right before we came on. It was at a Christian, private Christian school in Wisconsin. I might have the facts wrong because it was about an hour ago that I was watching it, that two students were killed. The shooter was killed, and two were critically wounded. At
Hmm.
the time that I came up to do the podcast, they hadn't announced how old the children were, but it was a K through 12, so it could have been a high schooler. I don't know any more details, but definitely something to watch as it unfolds. It's heartbreaking, heartbreaking.
Yeah, JD Vance, the incoming vice president, talked about this on the campaign trail, and he was excoriated by, again, the liberal media when he said, "This is our new reality. This is the world that we live in." Now, people were saying, "Well, they mistook his saying, his probably on
There's
purpose, by saying that we have to live with it. We don't have to live with it. We have to do something about it. But this is the world that we live in."
it unfortunately it is. Um, the times just change, the times evolve, and the things that we have to prepare ourselves for will
Hmm.
change and evolve, and as we grow as a country. And um, no one has the magic wand to fix that one either. So we're just going to have to find a way to come together and know that all of our hearts are breaking, and we're all trying to strive and fight for a better way forward, and
Yeah,
to figure out why this is.
yeah.
Definitely some social issues going on, I would have to assume. Something else that we were going to talk about tonight is this
Yes.
crazy weather.
What's
What?
going on? What's Al Gore must be in town or something. What's going on?
It was freezing cold, ice everywhere, and now we're getting up to 71, 72, possibly 73 tomorrow. How are we even handling this?
If
I'm
you don't
loving
like the weather in Wilmington, just wait 10 minutes because so Frosty's gonna melt tomorrow.
it. He
Uh,
is. He
and
is.
but it's supposed to switch back by Christmas, isn't it?
From what I'm looking at the weather, it will. I guess it depends on who you listen to.
I don't know about you, but I get pressure related headaches. So when these ups and downs in the is that I am all over the place. So it's going to be a painful few days over here at the Sample residence. And
I
then
love peppermint oil. Peppermint oil.
now
Oh,
next week we're not going to have a podcast next week because it's
no,
Christmas. And
it's
you and I were
Christmas.
talking about before the podcast about traditions. And what do you got going on over there at the Bascom House for traditions?
Oh goodness. So traditions in our house is Christmas vomits all over our house, as you can see.
No, don't, no, no. This is a high class podcast. Well, I guess that was better than
I
the.
love.
That's better than the other one.
What? You didn't like my Christmas tree? No, we so I was raised as an only child with just my dad. So Christmas was kind of quiet, and now that I have created my own big family. I love Christmas. I decorate. Our nature trail is 100 feet long, and I decorate it. I go all out. Baking cookies. We're gonna make like 12 dozen cookies tomorrow. I love Christmas. That just, and I get up on Christmas morning. We unwrap presents, and I make a big turkey. I don't care who's here. It's going to be a 20-pound turkey, whether there's 4 of us or 20 of us. There's going to be turkey for days. Um, and I make homemade mashed potatoes. And here's something that we, being from the coast, and my aunt is from the New Bern area, she taught me how to make oyster dressing. So we always have oyster dressing for Thanksgiving.
And now, do you do that for Christmas as well?
Yeah. Oh, did I say Thanksgiving? Yes, I
Yes.
do it for Thanksgiving and Christmas. We'll have oyster
Wow.
dressing,
Wow.
and it's the only time we make it. And how
Wow.
about you? You were telling me something about
Well,
Christmas
my
Eve.
my wife's family always has spaghetti on Christmas Eve, and it goes back to when Pam's grandmother was working retail, and she would always get off at 5 o'clock on Christmas Eve, and grandfather would have pasta going by the time she got home. It was kind of one because then they would all go to church afterwards, and so they needed something to have so that they can eat it
Quick.
as a family. So it's the one time because my wife and I are on low carb diets. It's the one time during the year that we can now have pasta, and it's Christmas, so carbs don't count on Christmas Eve.
They don't.
No, they don't. And
Alcohol doesn't either.
the,
Just saying, in
that's
case you're
in
wondering.
case you're wondering. And if you combine the two, then you're good for the rest of the year, right?
You're great. You're great. I think I think the last thing that I wanted to talk about tonight was Shannon Winslow being
Yeah.
named chair of the endowment. And why this gets me so excited, well, the headlines were first female chair of it, but my reasoning is because she's a local girl. I grew up with Shannon. Well, I grew up near Shannon. Her and I kind of knew the same people and were in the same crowd, but I'm glad that a local person that understands our nonprofits, understands our community, understands the the way Wilmington is and was and is becoming, is someone that's going to sit on the endowment board, head of the endowment board. So congratulations, Shannon. We're very proud of you.
Congratulations, Shannon. Now that's at the state level, is that right?
No, that's here locally.
That's here.
The
That's even
endowment.
better.
Yep.
That's even
Yep,
better.
that's our endowment. So
Fantastic. Well, last
keep up
week
the
you
good
had a
work.
trivia question all about the pardoning of a
The turkey.
turkey. Now, we asked people to respond. You can respond. And by the way, folks, make sure that you like and subscribe. We are on all the major podcast platforms. We're on YouTube. We're on Spotify. Uh, um, uh, uh, so make sure that you like and subscribe. It really does help us grow. And we ask that you respond to the trivia question. I had one response. It was my father
Oh,
who said Roosevelt, the second one. But he's not right, is
Rose.
he?
You know what? I'm gonna have to go back and look.
We are
Can we
hyper prepared here on the Nikki and Rule podcast
We
experience.
are hyper prepared because I was just prepared to give you a new trivia question. How about that?
We can't go on without answering the last trivia question. Answering the last trivia question.
I'm gonna go look. I actually
So the question from last week was, who was the president who did the first official?
the first official pardoning of the turkey was Carter.
It was Carter.
Yep. And the unofficial was John F. Kennedy.
John F. Kennedy. And
Yep.
then so
And then
Carter.
President Carter made it official.
Okay. And then I think it was under Obama that we started pardoning 2 turkeys.
Oh,
Yeah,
we learn something new every
I
day.
think that's the case. Okay, what do you got for trivia for Christmas? And we're gonna give you 2 weeks to stew on this one.
Well, I gotta decide which one I was gonna do. All right.
I like the
Well,
one that you.
one.
I like the second one that you came up with tonight.
All right. No, I like the first. Well, okay.
Okay,
What
then
was
go
the
with the first
second?
one. This is
Now you're gonna have to remind me what the second one was. Is it first base or second base? Who's on home?
I know who's on first base.
Who's on first base?
That's right.
Okay. So my trivia question would be, what did my true love give me on the 11th day of Christmas?
There you go. There you go. So, what was the gift from my true love on the 11th day of Christmas? So, you can answer that on YouTube. You can answer that on our webpage. We have discuss set up, so you can just log. You can answer that on our Facebook page. But the first person timestamp to give us their answer gets that sweater that Nikki is wearing.
Because you won't let me wear it anymore. My son
Yes.
said I couldn't wear it to school.
Yeah. Well, there's reasons for that. So, Nikki, Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas, Rule, and thank you for joining me in this wonderful adventure.
My pleasure and my honor. Merry Christmas to all of our listeners and our watchers, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye.